Hello, everybody, and welcome in to another episode of the Couch GMs podcast. It is Monday, December 16th, 2024. I'm your host, George Kurt, joined by the one and only Cody Roadcap. Cody, did you get Devontae Adams this week? Did you get Josh Allen this week? Any of that?
No, I didn't get Cooper Kupp either. So I know
Well,
the complete opposite end of the spectrum. No, pretty solid week in fantasy, but definitely a great week across the NFL. And just give a shout out to the Packers winning on Sunday Night Football, winning in Seattle for the first time since 2008.
I mean, I guess I can give a shout out to the Eagles for beating Russell Wilson for the first time, but no shout out to the Steelers for not beating the Eagles in Philly since 1965.
Good old classic rivalries, and it was so. If you didn't see the Sunday night game for some reason, you had to go to bed early. The fact that Seattle being known for one of the most loud, fan intensive stadiums, to have "Go Pack Go" chants resonating through the stadium in the first quarter was glorious.
And it's not even like the Seahawks are a bad team. They came to the game 8-5. I'm impressed. Packers fans travel well, man.
They do, and big playoff implications as we go through these next 3 weeks for that game and many more.
And I'm sure we'll talk some playoff standings as we go through games a little bit later, as we're here to break down everything we saw so far in Week 15 and look forward to Monday Night Football. Make sure you follow us at the Couch GMs on Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok to get even more than you do from the show. You can hit us in the DMs with any questions you have or drop them in the comments if you're watching us live Mondays and Thursdays at 6:30 East on Facebook and YouTube. Cody, why don't we get into our discussion? Sit back, relax. Let's chat. Starting off with some well wishes to Dolphins wide receiver Grant Dubose, who very scary situation on the field. He had his shoulder pads and jersey cut off actually after a hit to the head neck area. He's still in the hospital under care of doctors, but he has movement in all of his extremities, and all the tests appear to be that he is going to make a full recovery. So very happy to hear after another scary situation on the field.
Definitely a 12-minute delay. It did not look pretty, but happy to hear that he is doing well. Big fan of Grant DuBose, which is kind of like most people don't even know who that is. Second-year wide receiver out of the small school of Charlotte, but he started in Green Bay, 7th-round pick. So definitely a fan of his. That Packers wide receiver room is stacked. He got an opportunity in Miami, and it was big news because Miami had just released Odell Beckham Jr. Right after we were done recording last week. So DuBose, this young player, gets to come in, fill in for that. Waddle goes down. He's could potentially have a big day, breakout game, and unfortunately leaves an injury, but glad to hear he's doing well.
Definitely, Cody. Speaking of Odell Beckham, he cleared waivers on Monday at 4:00, free to sign wherever he would like.
Is there
I
any
know this
doubt?
is kind of off the cuff. Do you think there's anywhere that he would go? I know he's going to look for a contender.
I think there's one team. I think he's going back to the Rams.
I could see that. I mean, playing third fiddle instead of second this time behind Cup, because you also got Puka Nacua there, but it's a fit with a team he's familiar with.
I mean, but he was kind of like that third guy last time.
It was Van Jefferson there the last time, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Was it that, or was it still Robert Woods?
It
was Bobby Trees.
Either way. Could be Bobby Trees.
Dude, you're obsessed with Van Jefferson. That dude never did much. He got a couple deep balls.
Back when we were looking for fantasy relevant wide receivers on the Rams.
It was Robert Woods, but then that was the year I think he tore his ACL. Like right after Odell Beckham got there.
Got you. Correctly. The year of the Odell Beckham Call of Duty self-revive celebration was that one.
So I think that's where he's going to go back. I mean, you could throw out the Chiefs there as an obvious team that would. George rolls his eyes. I don't think they'll do that. I think they have enough old veteran wide receivers that they don't need to bring him back. They might even be getting their another wide receiver back for them. But yeah, outside of, could Buffalo be interested as a contender? Maybe. But I really do think this all points to the Los Angeles Rams, or maybe he goes back to the Baltimore Ravens. So
he didn't
I think
seem too happy with his usage in Baltimore either. But I mean, with what's going on with Deontay Johnson there and now being excused from practice this week after being suspended for a week for not wanting to play, there's a chance. They're still looking for somebody to play third receiver behind Bateman and Flowers. So,
yeah, I think it'd be one of those, but we'll see.
yeah, time will tell with that one. We'll keep you updated here on Thursday or before Thursday.
You might even wait might even wait a week or two to sign, especially if like the Rams are in consideration. Make sure that they're in line to win that division and make the playoffs.
It's very true. It's like similar how we saw Zach Ertz got released, waited a few weeks, signed with the Lions last year. Didn't really get any playing time, but was on a playoff roster.
Yeah, definitely.
I feel like a lot of people probably don't even remember that Zach Ertz was on the Lions. Don't know if he even played a snap, if I'm being honest.
I don't think he did, but I don't remember that one for sure.
I guess less exciting news. We have a bunch of injuries again. Feel like we're rewinding back to weeks 2 and 3. First week of the fantasy playoffs, we lose David Montgomery for the season with an MCL injury. He is getting knee surgery this week. Huge blow to the Lions, who are dealing with a ton of defensive injuries as well, and a big blow to fantasy teams.
Yeah, I mean, fantasy aside, the Lions continue to be a team that has just struggled upon struggled upon struggled this season with injuries. We're talking David Montgomery because we're predominantly a fantasy podcast. They took another injury to McNeil on the defensive line, their best run stuffer and probably interior pass rusher as well. So this team is super banged up. And I was having this conversation with some work friends today, and I'm going to ask you this. Are we getting to the point, the breaking point for the Lions, that you think it's the injuries are starting to just be too much to overcome?
I think at the least we're looking at the point where their defense is at the breaking point. And I mean, I think we're kind of starting to see that. There's been a lot of high scoring shootouts. So I feel like we're going back to the time of, was it the 2 year ago Lions when they started to be good again, but they were like the most fun team to watch because every game was 40 something to 30 something. I feel like we're getting back to that. And like, they're still going to be a successful team. They're going to be a team that can go out there and score on you at will. I mean, I think Montgomery being out hurts them, but they still have a lot of firepower on offense. But it's not a winning formula if you're looking to go forward in the playoffs towards a Super Bowl run. So I do think, with the defense reaching its breaking point, the team kind of is as well. Not saying they're going to completely fall off a cliff, though.
Yeah, and I mean they don't even really have to fall off a cliff to they look like the dominant team destined for home field advantage. They're now tied. They still have the tiebreaker over the Eagles currently. But depending on what happens tonight when we talk about those games, the Vikings control their destiny for the number 1 seed too, if they can win out, which would include a Week 18 win over the Detroit Lions. So a lot to play there, a lot to unfold. I guess on the bright side for the Lions, they're thinking that they could get Hutchinson back for an NFC Championship game and/or Super Bowl if they make it that far. So at least something to look forward to.
And I'm not sure if any of their other defensive pieces on IR could come back sooner, but they could definitely use it. I think they're up to 13 or 15 now. It's really bad.
Yeah, it's definitely been a tough season for them, which stinks because they've been so successful. But it has not been a fun time as we get later and later in the season.
I'll tell you what, that Lions-Vikings game at the end of the season has a chance to be massive when it comes to the standings. Depending on, it could be winner gets a bye, winner just gets the division. Depends on how that Eagles situation falls. I know there's a Packers game in there with the Vikings, or was it the Vikings or the Lions?
So Vikings Packers play week 17, Vikings Lions week 18.
So the Packers have a chance to spoil something in there too. There's a whole lot that can go on.
Yeah, for sure. Really, if you start looking ahead, I know we got a lot to get through and we're going to talk playoff scenarios and stuff like that, but you could circle Lions, Vikings, or Rams, Seahawks, those 2 week 18 matchups that most likely to get flexed into Sunday Night Football.
Rams Seahawks has a chance to be winning in and the other one's out, or at least for a division. The other one for a division, but the other team's going to be in. Could be an interesting week 18, but that's a couple weeks in advance. More running back injuries. The revenge tour for Nick Chubb, unfortunately, is over a couple weeks too early. He's now out for the season with a foot injury. I believe they called it a broken foot. He was just starting to get his wheels back under him, too. It was really nice to see some vintage Nick Chubb starting to come back out now. The run is over for the season.
Yeah, I mean, and the Browns are out of it now too, so no harm, no foul. Uh, with that said, we'll talk about it, but Jerome Ford probably going to be the biggest waiver pickup this week if he's still available. I know some people held on hope just because they didn't know what was going to happen with Nick Chubb over the last couple of weeks, but and when he got in there in that full-time work, he looked to be back to be a starting caliber running back.
He had some wheels this week that I didn't know he possessed. He was moving this week. I mean, maybe it's a little bit of benefit of having a couple weeks of lighter workload with Chubb being back, but he looked good.
Yeah, definitely.
And then finally, Patrick Mahomes suffered a high ankle sprain. He played through one, I believe, each of the last 2 years on his playoff runs, and they called it minor. Obviously, something to keep an eye on. If he misses a game, Carson Wentz gets a start in his place, but I don't think he's going to miss a game after seeing how he's handled the last few years with his ankle sprains.
So I think my guess is it's highly likely that he misses Saturday because remember they have 2 games in 10 days now, essentially going Saturday to Wednesday.
Saturday to then Christmas Day. Yeah, you're right.
So I think he misses Saturday and they'll save him for Pittsburgh. And if they beat the Houston without Patrick, they might just hold Patrick out for Pittsburgh as well.
Being as they are, I think 2 games up on the Bills, you could count it. I mean, it's a straight 2 games because Bills have a tiebreaker, but 2 games in the win column. They can afford to lose one with no penalty. That makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, isn't it 3 games now? Aren't they 12-1 and the Bills are something and 4?
11-3 for the Bills, 13-1 for the
11-3.
Chiefs. So it is
So
2 games in the win column. If it's a tie, Bills have the tiebreaker, but that's still 1 loss for free, basically, for the Chiefs.
yeah, so I think there's a good chance he misses Houston this week, just because it is a shorter week. It's a Saturday game. Let him get healthy. Let him try to get back for Pittsburgh, and a tough matchup against a playoff team. I mean, both these are playoff teams. And then if they win, maybe even save them for the playoffs. I know some people were like, just let him sit out for as long as he needs to. Don't go for that home field advantage. But what are your thoughts on that? Do you think they should fight for number one? Do you think Arrowhead is that important for them? Or can they go to Buffalo if they let that slip away and beat the Bills?
Hearing minor makes me think that they should still be playing for it. I honestly think they might be able to do the best of both worlds, sit him and still get the 1 seed. But I think I'd like the idea of sitting him Saturday, seeing how it goes. If they get the win, he sits Wednesday. If they don't get the win, you see if he's good to go Wednesday, try to beat the Steelers, and that should lock it up for them.
Yeah, I think I'm right there with you. But before we get into the games, we want to recap and talk about from the Week 15 season. Let's hit a fan question here.
Right.
Bryce has a question. He says, fellas, I'm down by 28. I have Bowers and need a flex option PPR, Jones, Addison, or more. What a tough question on the, trying to win a playoff matchup.
Here's the hope of Brock Bowers gets it for you alone. Let's start with that.
Yeah, but that's probably unlikely, although it is
Yeah.
PPR. For me, I think I'm removing DJ Moore. I'm down to which Vikings player do I want?
Yep. I'm personally gonna lean Aaron Jones. Because I feel like touchdowns are gonna be a big deal for you. Addison obviously has been fantastic, but I mean, it's funny. DraftKings not sponsored, just sent me a push notification earlier that Aaron Jones has scored the last touchdown for the Vikings. I think it was like 3 out of the last 4 or something. It's a lot. He's on a pretty good touchdown streak. That's your quickest way of knocking down a 28-point deficit on a Monday night. So I'm saying Aaron Jones.
Interesting, because I was leaning Jordan Addison in this one because it is PPR, right? And you have to think he'll get the targets and the opportunities after what we've seen the last couple of weeks. The Bears, despite their record, they do have a decent secondary with some good corners. Not saying they're going to lock down Justin Jefferson, but I imagine that he'll have a little bit harder time. They could rely on Jordan Addison. I hear what you're saying. I think the touchdown likelihood, though, is higher with Aaron Jones just because Addison had so many last week. It's tough to do that in back-to-back weeks, but I'd lean Addison. But as like the higher upside one. Jones is probably the safer one in that stance. So like I don't think Jones gives you 20, right? Like if Bowers has a down week. I think Addison could.
Yeah,
But
that's a fair point.
if you're gonna bank on Jones getting 12 and Bowers getting 16, maybe maybe it's a little bit something like that, then go with that option.
I'm
I wish
also
we had a
looking at
third person because we're now
yeah, right.
split, but uh
I'm trying to check out how the recent scoring has gone. I mean, obviously tight end a little bit uh up and down, but good news is Bauer seems to be every other week recently. 24, 5, 25, and 6. That's in half PPR scoring over the last 4 games. So you're expecting an up. But I think if
it's
you
also
have
probably
one
Desmond
boomer
Ritter.
bust, which I mean, I guess you can consider Bowers that being at the position, being as explosive as he is. I kind of like going safe with the other because you don't really want you don't really want to have the guy go for the 17 or 18 that you're really looking for, and then your other guy scores 2 because you went with 2 boomer bust players.
Does Desmond Ritter being the starter change your confidence enough that you feel like you have to go with Addison?
I kind of feel like I have to go with Tyler here and be like inexperienced or young quarterbacks like the tight end, and he obviously is the best weapon on that team as well. I think he's still going to get his targets.
Okay. So here's a twist. He added more context to this.
Mm-hmm.
The player he's playing has Sam Darnold.
Okay, yeah, I'm going to go Addison. You have to go Boom then. Plus, you're playing some defense, hoping the touchdown goes to Addison then.
All right, so we're going Bowers, obviously, and then Addison of those 3, and we wish you the best of luck as we wrap up the first week of the fantasy playoffs with 2 Monday night games that we're going to talk about in just a second. Let's talk about some of these Sunday matches, or heck, let's start at Thursday. Let's go all the way back to about 30 minutes after we ended our last show. We had the 3-hour slugfest in the rain, Rams at 49ers, which what a way to kick off the season, the fantasy football season with a goose egg from Cooper Kupp, a sub 5-point performance from Brock Purdy, and a game that didn't involve a touchdown. So, and there was the whole DeAndre Campbell stuff that we don't have to get into, but that mirrored itself on Friday morning, Thursday night, late Thursday night. That was a crazy situation. Did you have Kupp or Purdy anywhere? And how did your team fare in that situation?
I did not, luckily. I had a team with Isaac Arendo, who was generally okay, and I had a team with Puka Nacua he was probably the best player in the whole game. Not saying he did a ton, but I think he had 14.5 PPR, so it was solid. I got lucky enough to avoid the bad plays, but I heard a lot of people that were just saying like I was forced to play Brock Purdy, and that is a very bad way to start your playoffs.
Yeah, I had to play Brock Purdy. So here's my situation, league of record. Looks like I'm going to still escape with a win, barring some massive performance tonight, which the person I'm playing would definitely come back and do it to me. But I have Brock Purdy, and Patrick Mahomes. So now it's going to be like, do I put Purdy back in my lineup after he just did me dirty when Mahomes doesn't play on Saturday?
Carson Wentz season.
Heck no.
We'll talk about some streamers that can help you in a bit, Cody. How about that?
All right, we'll do that. But anything else from this game in general?
I mean, that pretty much knocks the Niners out of realistic contention for the playoffs, which is ridiculous. So, not what we expected this year.
Nope, but I think it's you've seen this team has played a lot of football over the last couple of years. 2 Super Bowl runs, an NFC Championship run. They didn't come out with the trophy, but they've played a lot of football. This offseason is going to be very interesting on what they do, who they bring back. Do they give Brock Purdy the mega extension? There's all kinds. There's been rumors that some team might try to trade for Kyle Shanahan. See a little bit of a coach's trade. Like San Francisco is going to be a big question mark. I think they'll bounce back in a good way. Probably throw it all in and go one more time with this collective group. Get a healthy McCaffrey, a healthy Ayuk. If anyone is gone, it's probably Deebo Samuel, especially after all them drops.
It's amazing the downfall, how quickly it's happened of Debo Samuel. But I still don't know if he's going to go anywhere. I don't know how hard that contract is to trade or anything like that. But no, I think CMC coming off of a lighter workload year after the injuries, you hope you have him healthy next season. They still have a lot of weapons. I think they are going to run it back one more year and see if next year comes out better. I think a lot of this has to do with a couple of deep playoff runs in a row. It can wear down some of these players.
I agree, and it does look like Debo has a potential out in his contract for some big cap savings. It'll still be
That
interesting.
would be interesting. That'll be an off-season talk for us. Hashtag Debo watch.
Well, how about some more offseason talk?
Oh, good.
And we'll tie it into the Jets Jags game, the game that meant absolutely nothing for anything, but became honestly probably the best 1A to 1B game in the early window, as Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams in the second half rolled back the clock about 5 years to vintage Rodgers Adams. Adams goes from no catches or one catch in the first half, I don't remember these, to 14 and 198 and two tutties.
Ridiculous second half.
Ridiculous second half. He catches his 100th touchdown. Are the Jets going to run this back now after this week?
Yeah, they're not going to run it back this season. I think they are. I think we have Rodgers trying to play some damage control on his, I want to leave the Jets. The Jets, I don't want to be with the Jets thing. Him and Adams look like they're starting to get a connection again. Obviously, we don't know if that's going to carry over into the next season, but it's something that's the one thing on their team that has proven success. So I think that and then the contract on top of it, I think they're going to run it back one more year. They have to just hope. They bought into this, see it through. If it doesn't work, then you're delaying your rebuild 1 year, but
yeah, I think it's interesting. And then, so this matchup, went back and forth. Sauce Gardner got his first pick of the year to prevent an overtime performance. Some could argue, should the Jets have even tried to score that touchdown? And that's how much you can tell that game didn't mean anything. By them scoring the touchdown and giving the Jags an opportunity, it let them break the 30-point barrier, which they hadn't done all season. So they were playing for some pride in that one. But do want to give a shout out to Brian Thomas Jr., the Jacksonville Jaguars, breaking the Jaguars rookie receiving record this past week. He's been the lone bright spot. And I think the good news for us in the fantasy playoffs is he's still putting up numbers with Mac Jones or Trevor Lawrence. It doesn't matter. He hasn't been like the elite of the elite, but he's been a solid wide receiver 2 flex option over the last couple of weeks, even with Mac Jones.
Yes, he has. And if he was in my starting lineup in League of Record, I might have a win locked up already. Instead, we spend week 3 in a row of waiting up on Monday night to see how it happens.
All right, Colts at Broncos. Are the Colts the most...
My team, they bleed blue? I'm sorry.
Are they the most, I don't even know how to word this, unluckiest team on fluke plays? Are they the dumbest team?
Can you call it a fluke play when your star running back drops the ball at the 1 yard line?
I wasn't even talking about that. I'm talking about the pick six throwback.
Yeah.
This is the team that, also snapped the ball after they moved the whole line against the Patriots all those years ago. Like, this team, they just need to stop doing trick plays. They don't know what they're doing. Take them out. And talk about a turning point, though. You mentioned it, that Jonathan Taylor run. I mean, that was like almost a 50-yard touchdown run that he dropped. Like 8-point fantasy swing. Like, there will be people that have lost on that 8-point swing there.
Talk to me tomorrow. I'll let you know.
Yeah, I mean, definitely could be a potential reason why you go out because of that. Definitely was a tough loss, but this Broncos team finds a way to win in a game that was basically very similar. The Colts aren't out of it yet mathematically, but now they lost to the Broncos, who were their best chance to get in after, and it allowed them to clinch, the Texans to clinch. So good, big win for the Broncos. The Colts were out early and the Broncos fought back. They're going to be a pesky team come playoff time.
Yeah, I was going to say, it depends on where they fall in seeding, I think. Because I think if they end up in a first-round matchup against Buffalo, don't really love their chances. But if they play Pittsburgh, if they play Baltimore, who they've already beaten, if they play Houston, they have a shot to win a playoff game, which is crazy with a rookie quarterback and the team that they put together the last few years.
Think about it. Depending on what happens with Patrick Mahomes left, they got a game coming up with the Chiefs. They have a chance to make the Chiefs their first round matchup in a game that they should have once already. They go in and beat them. They'd have to feel pretty confident in a Chiefs matchup round one.
They need a lot of help from Buffalo to get that one done. But could you imagine the storylines if they somehow help the Chiefs fall to 2 and then play them in the first round? That'd be crazy.
For sure. We have Bills Lions next. Let's save that one for the last
Okay,
one.
sounds good. That works.
We'll go to Steelers Eagles, Battle
Mhm.
of Pennsylvania. Take it away.
Have you ever seen a second half quite as dominant in a ball control standpoint as you saw in that game?
I don't think I've ever seen a team have the ball at the 3-yard line with 10.5 minutes left and not give the ball back.
But I mean, between that, the Steelers ran 11 plays in the second half. They had 5 minutes time of possession.
Yeah, I mean, it was crazy.
Absolutely crazy.
The Eagles just said, "Okay, watch this," and just marched themselves down the field and held the ball. And I mean that was in their Super Bowl run 2 years ago. That was their bread and butter. Like,
It's
you
true.
knew if they were the king of 8-minute drives in the fourth quarter, 9-minute drives in the fourth quarter. And they're starting to find a little bit of that game. They're playing great football. They got the ball going to A.J. Brown more this past week. They got Devonta Smith back involved after he's missed some time with injury. So that's definitely a team to watch out for. I know that they've had a good record all year, but they hadn't been playing their best football. And it's just one game. You have to stack performances. But this Eagles team had a really good week. If they can come back again with another one and start building on this, they could be a scary team come playoff time.
Definitely. It was encouraging after we talked about how they have to get the passing game going, how they did this week with Devontae Smith and 10 catches and A.J. Brown broke 100 yards. But Steelers side of the ball, I mean, I know they had a tough matchup against a tough defense, but they look like they are majorly relying on George Pickens. Like, them without George Pickens, they don't look like they can pass the ball.
I think some of that is level of competition. Some of that is, on the road and whatnot. I mean, they were able to score points last week without George Pickens. It wasn't Calvin Austin, but they were able to score points. So I think some of that has to do with matchups, right? Like with that secondary, it's tough to the Vic Fangio defense. He's the king of we're going to make you go 13 plays, and it's hard to do that when you don't have a reliable guy. You saw Pat Freiermuth come alive a little bit, but yeah, they definitely rely on George Pickens a lot. I don't want to take away from that, but that whole offense, like I've said it, I keep comparing them to the Kansas City Chiefs. Like, they win on defense. They run into an offense that can beat their defense. They're going to have a hard time keeping up.
I kind of feel like the Steelers teams of recent memory have been that way. Not much has changed having Russell Wilson in there. We're more comparing the Chiefs to how we've seen the Steelers win, except the Chiefs have done a better job at it.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, it was a good game. Shout out to the Eagles for winning the Pennsylvania State Championship.
And we'll keep an eye on how that number 1, number 5, number 2 seed shakes out in the NFC over the coming weeks as things got tighter with the Lions loss, Eagles win, and we'll preview the Vikings game in a bit. Do you want to talk Packers Seahawks, the game that followed up that Eagles Steelers game?
Yeah, sure. A great game on Sunday. I talked about it a little bit at the top of the show, so I won't spend too much time on it. But the Packers look good. They got Josh Jacobs going early. He definitely slowed down in the second half. If you needed a lot of points from him, and you saw that first drive, the first quarter, you're like, oh yeah, I have a chance. And then that slowed down. The Packers continue to have their issues with going through some low spots, but Jordan Love and Toyotathon, name me a better duo.
I wish I would have saved the tweet. I don't think I did.
With his Toyotathon stats?
His Toyotathon stats.
Yeah, it's crazy. I didn't save the tweet. The only stats that are better are Josh Allen the last 2 weeks.
So Josh Allen in the last 2 weeks is the only thing that beats Toyotathon. Got it.
But the throws he's making, the catches people are making, it's been a heck of a lot of fun. So, and I think it just makes that Seattle Seahawks, Los Angeles Rams race even tighter. And I know the Cardinals have lost to the Seahawks now, but the way they played against the Patriots gives you a little, obviously it's the Patriots, could make that even more interesting down the stretch.
Definitely could. All right. That was the
Bills
other thing that
Lions.
came in my head. I'm sorry. Was that we talked about in the group chat the 32 team half quarterback league or 64 team half quarterback league, whatever it was.
Oh yeah, the guy, that was a crazy league. We'll have to break that down further on a little bit later.
We'll find an off-season show to talk about ridiculous fantasy leagues, and we found maybe the most ridiculous one of all time. So make sure you subscribe if you're listening in, and wait out for that one.
For sure. But Bills Lions, I mean, it was a good game. I felt like the final score was closer than it really felt. Like I felt like the Bills kind of had their way with the Lions. It got interesting. Dan Campbell, or should I say Dan Gamble, like got in his own way with that, some of the clock management in the fourth quarter, the onside kick with 12 minutes left when you finally started to slow down the Bills offense. Like a lot to say, but at the end of the day, it was a good game. The Lions are banged up. Well, I think the most interesting thing for me with now all the injuries, they lost their top dog, momentum. How does they respond? Luckily, they get to play the Bears next. So don't anticipate them, and the Bears are going to be on a short week. Think they're going to start to refine some of their mojo over the next couple of weeks, but I'm definitely looking forward to that Week 18 matchup with them and the Vikings.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not super worried about their matchups until they go up against the Vikings. But it's with all the injuries, you're really going to see how resilient this team is. They have to win some games that they should win. But that's easier said than done with any given Sunday, especially with essentially a second string defense in full now.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a tough one. And then I'm going to ask you this as the Eagles fan.
Yep.
Is there any way Josh Allen loses MVP?
Even I'm at the point now where even if Saquon Barkley rebounds and breaks Eric Dickerson's single season record, Josh Allen still wins MVP.
Okay.
It's crazy at this point. I know we actually had a discussion coming from Tyler who was like, when you look at Josh Allen's stats, like he's not really top 5 in much of anything besides rushing, but it's just how he's taken this team with these weapons that are not special. If you put his wide receiver core against pretty much everybody else that's a contender, besides maybe the banged up Chiefs, and depends how much you like the Packers receivers, they're worse. And he's still out there just balling every single week. Like he deserves it at this point, unless he really has a major collapse.
Yeah, I think that would be. I think that it's not completely done, but like the odds are definitely in his favor. It would take like if he has like a 3 interception collapse this week against the Patriots, right? Or they, which could happen as they're coming off a big win, and
And
then
divisional game.
and then he follows it up with another like 2 touchdown, 2 pick game. They go from potential 1 seed opportunity to the 2 or the 3 seed, and Barkley does break the record. I think it's would be interesting. I'm also interested though too. The more I think about it with the Barkley record, like how many people. I don't want to say it's not, an elite accomplishment to break that record because nobody's done it right since.
Yeah.
But Dickerson did it in 14 games, where Barkley would have done it in 17. Like, so I wonder how much of that would be, do we start to see that? Oh, there's extra games now, kind of hurt his case.
Well, yeah, because you can even be like, oh, what about Adrian Peterson? Adrian Peterson fell like 20 or 30 something yards short, but again, he did it in 16.
Right.
We're having 17 here.
So we'll have to wait and see. I mean, if he does break the record, it gets very interesting. But I think I talked about this last week. If he doesn't break the record, I don't know if he gets an award this year. Offense
because
or
of the
MVP.
Jamar Chase race.
Because Jamar Chase is balling out.
If you want to look at it, then your next up for MVP would probably be what Jamar Chase and Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson put up 5 touchdowns this week, but like he would need to do that week after week to get back into the chase with where Josh Allen's been. Jamar Chase would have to win the Triple Crown, and I still don't think he has a shot.
Yeah, I think Burrow would have a better shot. I mean, because Burrow's playing lights out too, but they're
Burrow's
not.
playing lights out and trying to carry that defense. It's just not working too well.
Yeah. So, and I think that's a good question. Like valuable versus best player, I think is always a tough question we have in the NFL specifically.
Definitely.
Ready to do some streams, ads, waiver wire.
Let's do it. So obviously, some of you in the fantasy playoffs might be still playing the quarterback stream game. I want to start off with a controversial name in quarterback streams lately, and maybe we don't have an answer, like a solid answer tonight, but would you consider playing Kirk Cousins next week against the Giants?
I think that might be something worth looking at least. You know, if he has another bad performance against the Raiders, who have nothing to play for, they probably want to lose to try to get in the Shadur Sanders sweepstakes. Like, yeah, you have to, put them into conversation as well. But if he balls out, like he gets the Giants, we just saw what Lamar Jackson did. It would feel terrible playing him in the semifinal matchup. But if you have Brock Purdy who had a pretty bad game, and then in Patrick Mahomes, like I do in our league of record, like I'm gonna be looking. Do I want him? Do I want Russell Wilson versus the Browns? Like, do I roll out Aaron Rodgers after his big performance this past week? Like, it's definitely a tough situation to be in.
Really quick shout out to Brandon. Good job, Cody, for making him go 0-4 this week.
It's not over yet. I don't rule nothing out with Brandon. Our games never end not close.
It's very true. You have the best rivalry, I think, that I've seen in pretty much any fantasy league.
And we like each other. That's the well, at least I like Brandon. Maybe he doesn't like me. But we just can't seem to find a way to not have a game end with less than a point.
Exactly. And 2 of them were in fantasy championships. So even better.
Yeah, it's not fun. But it's a great time. Mooney is not getting 40. Dude, you never know. What if he goes off 10 for 140 and 2 tutties? Is that even 40 points?
10 for 140 and 2. No, I don't think it is.
14, 12, that's 26. Half point PPR 10. No, that's 31. Okay, well, you're probably not.
You're still 10 points off. Almost 10 points off.
Yeah, I was going to say maybe make it 12 for 180 and 3 tutties then. There we go.
Yeah, let me see. What did Jamar Chase do against the Ravens twice? He needs that. And yeah, we're talking about Darnell Mooney, not Jamar Chase.
I appreciate you, Brandon, for wishing me luck in the next round. We'll duke it out again next year.
Yes. Anyway, so you're still on quarterbacks. Did you mention Stafford and Rodgers?
I mentioned Rodgers in a little bit, but I think that one's an interesting one. The Jets defense hasn't been very good. Stafford, not the best game in the rain, but it was in the rain. I will say, people hate hearing me say this is a 1:00 game. West team coming east. Could be a slow start for the Rams. Don't know if that's worth mentioning. But there's not a lot of great options at streaming quarterback this week.
I hope you have a guy who's at least borderline that you can throw in there with some kind of confidence. Someone like a Baker Mayfield.
I think the one I am looking at, he's also the most owned at like 39%, is Russell Wilson. But I think that is dependent on if Pickens is back in the lineup this week.
Definitely. And he didn't have a good game the last time against the Ravens. Those Steelers-Ravens games are notorious to be field goal fest, 16-13 kind of games. Not saying it's going to be that way, but that tends to be how they fall.
Yeah. And also just reminder, Ravens, Chiefs, Texans, Steelers all play Saturday. So make sure those players in your flex spot. You got a game Thursday still, Chargers, Broncos, but we got all those to look forward to and talk about as we get more and more football as we get closer and closer to the actual playoffs.
Yes, we do. And Cody and I will be back on Thursday to break down all the games from next week. Wide receivers on the waiver wire. I think we have some interesting names to talk about in this one. Starting with Jalen McMillan, who had a very good game along with a lot of the rest of the Buccaneers offense this week, putting up 40 points on the Chargers. Any interest in a stream here?
I think there is some interest in a stream there. It's not a guy I'm forcing in my lineup, right? He's had 2 good
Mhm.
weeks in a row. I'm not forcing in my lineup, but this team we've seen it before. Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, like been able to put up 2 solid wide receiver options. McMillan is filling into that uh good option. And it wasn't like Mike Evans had a down day either. Like he still got his against a very good Chargers defense. So McMillan would definitely be my favorite guy to add, probably in all waiver wire systems this week, and throw him in my lineup if I had to.
I'm with that. I mean, maybe he's slightly more boomer bust than some of the other guys, but I don't know, maybe not. Quentin Johnston seems to be the consistent guy of the group because he's finally been getting the targets. He's at, I think, 2 or 3 straight games of 10 plus in half PPR. Um, he seems to be really getting a rapport with Justin Herbert. Again, not someone I'm forcing in the lineup. I think he's kind of high floor, low ceiling. But if you're just looking for someone that could be solid to fill in a flex spot, that's kind of where he's been over the last month or so.
Yeah, he had a really good game. I'm just looking at up. He had the 10 targets. McConkey, his first game back, he had 7 targets too. So
this was actually a game with all of them in the lineup. It was good to see him still getting the targets.
yeah, I would love to see the snap counts to see if there was any kind of limitations for McConkey. I know McConkey got the touchdown. And he still seems to be that security blanket, but it is worth noting that Johnson is getting more and more involved.
And a team that can sustain 2 wide receivers if they play that way, which they have been more since the run game's been beat up lately. Once they lost
I think
J.K. Dobbins.
I think that's a good point, but I also think it's worth noting that they were down early and quick this game, and with their bad run gaming, there was a lot more targets, and I mean they only scored 17 points, so that didn't turn into touchdowns, but they were throwing the ball a lot more than we typically see out of a John Harbaugh team. So it's probably why I would knock Johnston down a tier to my confidence level if I had to stream him this coming week.
Still worth somebody to be owned if you are out
Agreed.
there with an extra bench spot.
Yeah,
I think it's amazing that he's had at least a decent stretch, and he's still only, I think, 14% owned on NFL.com leagues.
that's because everybody just knows where the drop balls. It's like, dude,
Yeah.
I mean, he's not the same player, but it's very similar to Christian Watson. The average fan just sees the drop 3 years ago now at this point in Minnesota, saw the drop against San Francisco on Sunday Night Football. But he went through a 10 catch, 350-yard stretch like this season. Like he had 4 catches for 50 some yards last night. Like he's getting more and more involved as well. I wouldn't go out and pick him up because there's so many mouths to feed in Green Bay's offense, but because when you're a big play wide receiver and you drop one, they're shown on SportsCenter.
Yep.
Like Jaden Reed, had a pretty good game, leads the league in drops this year.
It's true.
So nobody talks about that. They still talk about him as, a top option. So just something to keep in mind. And when you think of like those deep play guys, like a Quentin Johnston, like a Rashad Bateman, he's not like the speed deep play guy, but he's a big play guy for them. And he had 2 touchdowns this past week. And as a low key Ravens fan, more like you're just forced to watch them with your wife, so you know more about them than most. Why should someone pick up Rashad Bateman?
It does seem like, which I would not expect this, knowing like what kind of receivers they are. Zay Flowers has been a lot more short to intermediate route, kind of run after the catch receiver, and Bateman has been getting a lot of the deep balls lately. So it is a very risky, high upside but high risk kind of play. But there's now been multiple weeks where Bateman's either put in a touchdown, put in multiple touchdowns. He has more touchdowns this season than he does in his entire career before this. So they're definitely trying to find ways to get him the ball. The opportunity's there, but he's a very risky kind of play. He's someone to consider if you're projected to lose a game to a 1 seed and you don't have a flex. Like someone like him is somebody who might be able to give you that boost you need to get back into a game.
Yeah, I think that's something worth noting. And then this isn't so much for, week 16, especially with the situation at quarterback, but a name to watch out for. Hollywood Brown is in line to potentially return in week 16 for the Kansas City Chiefs. Again, not going to start him without Patrick Mahomes. Probably not going to start him in his first game back. But if you're not in love with those guys or you have someone that you're going to start this week, no matter what, and you don't need him, go ahead and pick him up. See what his
Yep.
usage is. See how much is going on in this week. He also plays Saturday, so then if you need to pivot to somebody on Sunday, you can drop him in most leagues. But I think Hollywood Brown is a guy that, we don't talk a lot about stashes in the playoffs, but if he comes back strong and becomes a focal point and he can help you win a championship in 2 weeks, like, it might be worth adding him. And there's no harm, no foul if he just rides the bench the rest of your season.
Definitely. And that's the one good side about Saturday football, is being able to have the ability to see his performance and drop him if necessary or whatever it might be. Never be afraid to play the free agent market, play with your bench. Running back position then, Cody. Another couple interesting ads this week. I'm looking at New Orleans and backup running back Kendre Miller, because Alvin Kamara left the game with an injury. I don't know if I could get myself hyped up enough to play him, but if you're missing Kamara and aren't deep at running back, he might be your best option.
Yeah, I think it has to be very very stressed. Like, if you had McCaffrey and you weren't able to get Garendo, and now you have Kamara out, and you're just like pulling at teeth. One, congrats to making it this far. Or you're trying to go out with a bang and still win your consolation bracket. But being that it's a Monday night game, so if he's anything close to a game time decision, like not knowing what's going to happen there, not knowing what's going to happen with the quarterback position. Like, I like Kendre Miller, and I think he is worth an ad. If you think Kamara is going to miss more, or we hear over the next couple of days, Kamara is out, the next couple of weeks, potentially out for the season, as we get more and more results. But in terms of a play this week, I don't think Kendre Miller is the guy.
Still worth a stash. You never know if he comes out and surprises us with a Kamara injury and then he misses multiple weeks. Maybe we have a different thought next week. We'll see what happens. And then the big one, someone who looked really good that we mentioned earlier in the show in relief, Jerome Ford coming in for Nick Chubb.
Yeah, I definitely think that is probably, I think it's him and McMillan that's going to be the biggest, fab spenders, chasing points, however you want to shape it up, top waiver wire ad this coming week. And honestly, Ford's probably going to be the top guy just because running backs are so much harder to find.
Oh, yeah.
There's a quarterback controversy there as well, but I think Ford, we've seen him be dominant, or maybe dominant's not the right word, but at least, a solid option when he didn't have Nick Chubb. And I think that could continue as we go into the next week as well.
And also, don't be the person who's like, I have Kamara, I have to target Kendre Miller. If you have a high waiver, put that first waiver request in for Jerome Ford and then put the backup as Kendre Miller, especially because Ford's going to be a starter for the rest of the season with Chubb out. Kendre Miller might not be, and I think Ford's going to be the better performer of the two, even if Miller starts.
And Brown gets Cincinnati this week, so our Ford,
no defense.
Exactly. Brown is the Bengals running back, but that's where I got that name from. But Ford against the Bengals, no defense. I like that. But we're talking Ford, we're talking Miller. Go out and get your handcuffs. We've talked about that, as you need less and less people to start, as there's no more buys. Go out and grab a Trey Benson for the Arizona Cardinals if James Conner were to go down. Not that we're ever rooting for injuries. Go out and get a Tyler Algier in case something happens to Bijan. Go out and get,
Cam Akers
for Aaron Jones. Some teams you don't want, you don't need their handcuff because it's just not that great. Like, I'm not going out to get like a Jerry McNichols or a Chris Rodriguez in Washington now that Eckler's on IR and Brian Robinson's there. Like, I'm not going to go out there and get those. I'm not going to go out and get whoever is the Bengals one. But there's some guys that they have a quality backup in there as well. But I did want to ask you about a friend of the show. Because of the Lions being a 2 running back system.
Yeah.
Any interest in going out there and getting Craig Reynolds?
I don't think it hurts, because I don't think they're going to give Jahmyr Gibbs every single one of those carries. I don't think it's going to be I don't think Craig Reynolds is going to come in there and get the 50-50 split that David Montgomery did. But you never know if he turns the 8 carries into something that he starts earning more of a workload or whatever it ends up being. I think as a speculative ad, if you either were a Montgomery owner trying to find something you can't get forward, or if you're just have the extra bench spot and want to throw a speculative ad out there, I think it's a good move.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think Gibbs will get predominantly the work, but I think it's worth adding. He might get some of the goal line stuff, and it's also a handcuff that's worth owning in a run first offense.
Run first offense is a big thing. You very rarely see running backs get 100% of the carries anymore, and it's still not going to be the case there. Don't know if it's going to be enough to split it. Worth a look in the waiver wire. Want to talk about your favorite position besides kickers?
Sure.
Tight ends. Couple guys to look at. I'm just going to rapid fire this one because I don't think it's worth spending too much time. If you're still out there struggling at the tight end position, some names to look at. Pat Freiermuth scored a touchdown this week. We got Mike Gesicki in a good matchup. Noah Gray seems to be able to pop off at any time in Kansas City. And then Stone Smart if Will Dissly misses more time in LA with the Chargers.
I think you did a great job wrapping that up.
Cool.
I don't think I have anything else to add about this position that it's so hard to predict.
We're searching for touchdowns. Hopefully one of those guys hits for you and you pick the right one. Streaming defenses. How about a struggling as of late Buffalo defense against New England?
So last week, and the reason that Buffalo, I think going into last week, probably not anymore, was still technically a top 10 fantasy defense, despite their recent struggles over the last 2 weeks. But we had to play New England, a divisional matchup, potentially low scoring, at least on the New England side. But I think that's worth noting, and they're available because they played Detroit. So that's one. And I also last week was like, there's no way I'm trusting Cincinnati against the Titans.
Tennessee. Yep.
Despite the Titans being bad and turnover, I'm like, no way I'm trusting Cincinnati. Cincinnati went out and had like 16 points. Should have had 22
in World Cup scoring, I think.
20 in World Cup, should have had 26 if Jordan Battle didn't drop the ball at the half-yard line on a fumble recovery.
With that this week, all of a sudden, we saw that come back.
I don't understand it at all. Like, I don't understand how you don't have the spatial awareness just across the goal line, right?
Right.
But I can at least understand it more from a defensive back scenario. Like, you're getting to score, you don't get to score often. Like, it could be years in between your opportunities to score. You got the ball, you're making a big play, you're ready to celebrate. You see the goal line, you drop it a half a yard short. Okay. Again, I don't understand it, but I can, be like, okay, I'll forgive him. The Jonathan Taylor one, you are a veteran running back that that is paid as one of the highest paid running backs. There's no way. I mean, heck, we saw Deshaun Jackson do it, so it's not like the level of payment is going to determine it. But like, I just don't understand. Like, just hold the dang ball.
Yeah, I'm only saying that because it seems like it's been a long time since we saw one of these. And then I think it was even in the last 3 or 4 weeks, we saw one and then 2 more this week. It's like, it's just coming back out of nowhere. But shout out Jonathan Taylor. If I lose this week in our league of record, you can make a CVS receipt to get back at me and just put Jonathan Taylor dropped at the half-yard line multiple times.
Okay. Sounds good.
Cool.
Sounds good. You're not going to lose this week. You're the team of destiny.
One last streaming defense. Speaking of them Titans, we got the Indianapolis Colts defense against the Titans. Don't know who's even going to start it at quarterback for Tennessee, but Mason Rudolph wasn't fantastic earlier. We saw a couple of decent weeks out of Will Levis, and it just seemed to all come crumbling apart this week.
Yeah. Tennessee's looking rough.
I don't even think I asked you pre-show. Do you want to do a quick World Cup check-in?
What time we got? Sure.
All right.
I mean, let's rapid fire style. We'll do the full breakdown on Thursday.
Sounds good. So early, I mean, obviously now some of these games are not final. Projections in Group A showing a strong chance of Tyler going over Sheeler and Sean over Josh W in Group A. So that would mean Tyler moving on to the second round, joining Cody, who's on a bye. In Group B, we have likely David over Kempe, meaning our last champion that was in the playoffs is going to be eliminated. Interesting for wildcard seeding. And then Reed did beat Brandon, who we'd mentioned earlier, gave a shout out for him going 0-4 this week. Group C, we have likely Cole beating Mike B. And then Anthony, who seemed to be the hottest team in Group C, is in a very tight one against Hayden, That one's going down to the wire. I think it's within like 5 points projection in tonight's game.
That'll be fun to watch as that unfolds. And like I said, we'll be there Thursday. We'll be back on Thursday, break it all down, and let you know who moved on and whatnot. But if you have any really interest in somebody that you've latched onto, feel free. But we got a Monday night preview, and I can never remember. Do I got a bumper for this one, or do you got
No,
to
you
do
do
the
not.
thing? Do it.
And we got Monday night previews. Good old Monday night doubleheader.
That's not the intro music. I need you to hit the bumper music for me.
Boom, 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 boom.
There you go. Thank you.
All right.
But doubleheader.
Doubleheader. Start with the first game, the 8 o'clock East game, Bears Vikings.
Let's talk about it. A game the Vikings need to win without to keep their hopes at the number 1 seat alive. A loss doesn't eliminate them, but they need a lot more help where now they control their own destiny. Their big inactive would be Stephon Gilmore in the secondary. He has had, an okay season. He's not the player he once was, but outside of that, there's no real big names inactive for the Vikings. And then on the Bears side, we do have Roschon Johnson inactive. They're RB2, which would make Travis Homer RB2.
Travis Homer.
Not that means a lot too, but I'm really interested to see what this means for DeAndre Swift. A lot of people probably
up too,
and a lot of people probably have benched. But if he gets a decent week, with a full workload without Roschon Johnson, might make you feel more confident about playing him in the future weeks if you need to spot start him. But this game has an over/under at 44.5, and the Bears are 7-point underdogs. I know this last game was close. It went down to the Bears came back from 14 points, but it's in Minnesota. I think Minnesota's going to win this one pretty easily.
I think so too. I don't think this is going to be much of a speed bump in the Minnesota Vikings running through the schedule as of late. But interested to watch it for fantasy terms, being how is DeAndre Swift going to rebound, if he's going to stay healthy moving forward, teams that might have benched him. And then a lot of people probably relying on some Vikings this week. I know if Jordan Addison decides to put up a 0, I'm looking pretty good this week. If he goes off, I think I'm down to 1 league.
Yeah, I also think it's always interesting to see how the Bears wide receivers shake up. We heard Bryce ask earlier in the show about DJ Moore. I know I benched Keenan Allen this week for Tyron Tracy in a league that could still work out in my favor, but Tyron Tracy only had like 4 points, so probably not a great time to do that. And then Rome Odunze has been getting some targets. Then he goes like an absent week, which makes it very hard to predict. But that's always a thing to pay attention to in this matchup as well.
Definitely. Bears wide receivers have been one of the more frustrating wide receiver groups in the league so far this year. Anything else on Bears Vikings?
Now let's talk about this Desmond Ridder revenge game.
Desmond Ridder revenge game because the Raiders are without Aiden O'Connell. He is listed as the emergency third quarterback, so he's healthy enough for that, but they obviously do not want to get him in the game tonight. I think him and Max Crosby are the two big inactives for the Raiders.
Yeah, Crosby's actually out for the season, so
he just hasn't been IR'd.
Yes.
Got it.
That is correct. He announced on Instagram that he will be out for the season.
And then a couple of defensive players, Elijah Wilkinson, Rashawn Evans inactive for the Falcons, but no one super relevant to what we're going to talk about here. This seems like a get-right game for the Falcons, if you ask me.
Can primetime Kirk revitalize Kirk Cousins?
Primetime Kirk won a primetime game earlier this year.
I know. So, can he... he's been noontime Kirk all season. That's been bad. Is primetime Kirk his new motto, and he's just lights out in primetime? You have to think the Buccaneers beating the Chargers this past week put a lot of pressure on the Falcons to keep up with the Buccaneers in the playoff race. If the Falcons somehow drop to the Raiders, I think the noise from Michael Penix gets a lot louder, and the Buccaneers feel a lot more comfortable in winning their division, who I know we'll talk about seedings and playoff scenarios. They actually jumped to the 3 seed as of now over the NFC South or AFC West. Oh my God, Cody. NFC West teams. So they have a lot of ground to keep up if they want to keep their playoff hopes alive.
Definitely do. Not much to talk about on the Raiders side. Any I don't know. I hope no one played their running backs, I guess is what I'm thinking. Brock Bowers, we need him to go off, but
I'm at least interested to see the running back situation now that Madison's back.
yeah.
I mean, Sincere has looked good. They talk about wanting to get him more involved. I think if Sincere has another good game, even with Madison back, it makes, if you needed a spot start next week, something that you could potentially do in a situation as they play the Jags. But not that I'm hoping that you played him this week in fantasy, but a guy I'm looking for the next couple of weeks.
So there you go. If you're on a bye, even if you have a guy on your bench or on free agency, still things to look for in tonight's games. And I hope it's a good slate despite us not liking the doubleheader Monday night games.
Yeah. Hopefully at least one of them's a good game, and then you don't have to worry about the other one.
There we go. Or you're watching something in fantasy. And for whatever scenarios you have out there, I hope you all win and we can help you out with getting to your fantasy championship by getting through next week.
Yeah, George, we only have 2 weeks left of the fantasy season. It's crazy. A lot happened. On Thursday at 6:30 Eastern, live, answering questions, getting you ready for the Week 16 slate. Mondays and Thursdays, that's us. Make sure you're following us at the Couch Jams, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, X, all them good places. I'm Cody Roadcap. That's George Kurth, and we'll talk to you all next week.